Thank you for those of you that are continuing with us this afternoon, and welcome to those that are just joining us now. I am honored to introduce our panelists for Black and Green, Seeds, Recipes, and Food Culture from the African Diaspora. And our first panelist is Chef Corby Benoit. What began as an early childhood curiosity has now unfolded into a committed passion for Chef Corby Benoit. Chef Corby specializes in vegan cuisine and has done so for nearly 20 years. Originally hailing from the Park Slope section of Brooklyn, he is the son of Haitian immigrants and a product of various New York City cultural movements stemming from the 1980s to the present. Throughout his journey, Chef Corby has traversed the worlds of music production and DJing, journalism, fine art, and fashion. He is a diverse and impassioned creative who relentlessly seeks to create exciting and inspired plant-based foods. And in recent years, he has created a base here in Los Angeles where he has launched a meal prep service named Cafu Alakine Foods. Chef Corby also produced a vegan food, art, and music festival called the Plant-Based Festival, which a video for the link for that festival will be added to the chat. And he is also presently working on crowdfunding his first cookbook entitled, quote, "No Mistakes Allowed." With a drive to remain curious yet resourceful, Chef Corby has been active in educating people about his journey and culinary techniques. He remains insightful, enterprising, and optimistic about his purpose and the potential for all of the human family. And then for our second panelist who is joined here today, our very own Viviana Woolridge. Viviana is a fourth-year student and a double major in African American Studies and Chicano Studies. She is the current Black Student Union president and one of our top scholars. She is co-creating a research-based cookbook that highlights African American food culture and history and integrates her own family history as well. She is working in partnership with the U-Acre Project, which includes the Fullerton Aberdeen Learning Farm and Monkey Business Cafe. So with that, I will turn it over to Chef Corby, who's going to start leading this demonstration.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for that warm welcome. And I'm just really happy to be here. Can everyone hear me properly? All right, great. So first things first, I just want to thank you guys again and just welcome you into my kitchen. Today we're going to be working on two dishes that are a little bit of the crowd pleasers for me. I developed this first dish, which is the Southern style oyster mushrooms. It's basically loosely based off of my mom's fried chicken recipe. And obviously I don't eat chicken anymore. And every now and again, this is not a food that I eat every day, but every now and again I get a taste for something that is reminiscent of my mom's fried chicken. So I developed this dish. And it was also inspired by other chefs who are doing a lot of cool things with oyster mushrooms. So let me start off by putting on my apron and we're gonna get to working. And then right after that, we're gonna make some greens. I have some collard greens that I'm gonna do. We're gonna do a very simple saute. I'm gonna just put this apron on. Give me 1 second. I just need to grab something from the other room. I'm still here. I'm not going away too far. I'm still here. There's just two ingredients that were in the other room that I had to grab. And as we go forward, I'm going to do my best to position the camera in a way that everybody could view properly. All right. So here we have oyster mushrooms, and I hope everybody can see me. Again, I'm going to do my best to position the camera in a way. Let's see if I can enlarge my screen, my viewing screen. No, I can't actually. Okay, it's okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, cool. I just had a different view from what it. Hey, I see everybody else in the chat. How's everybody doing? Okay. All right, so here are my oyster mushrooms. Little tip, these are usually found for people who live in the city of LA, or if you live in LA County, a lot of various Asian markets tend to stock these at good prices. You know, I've gone to the Korean market here in LA, and I got this particular assortment of them I got from Whole Foods, which is relatively close to where I live. So I kind of separated these. I kind of try to make them bite-sized, because I think about how they cook in the pan. So maybe we could take a moment to just make them bite-sized. And if you could see my hand, just in reference, like this is probably the biggest that you want to make these pieces, all right? So then the next thing, we're just gonna keep going. What's going on? What's going on? We're just gonna. I just had my housemates just came home. I just Hey, what's going on? So the next thing we're gonna do, just look through your collection of oyster mushrooms. You want to make it into like bite-sized pieces that once you cook them can turn into like a fried chicken style type of thing. Everybody good? Everybody there? Now, the next thing I'm gonna do, let's focus our attention. Let's grab a bowl and let's prepare the batter. And I typically make a wet batter. I've observed a few different techniques for how people make this dish. Some people make a wet batter and a dry batter, where they put the oyster mushrooms in the wet batter first, then they put it in the dry. To stay consistent with what I learned from my mom growing up, she only used the wet batter. So I'm gonna keep it with just solely a wet batter. And I'm gonna start that batter off. I mentioned in the ingredients that you need a cup. It all depends on how much of this stuff you're making. You probably don't have to use that much, but for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to try to stay as consistent to the recipe that I have on the notes so everybody can follow along properly. So I'm going to take a cup of my chickpea flour. Were you guys able to get your chickpea flour properly, or did you have to kind of scour the earth for chickpea flour? I hope not. All right. I didn't realize you guys can't hear. You guys' mics are muted. So I'm going to take a cup of this chickpea flour, and I'm going to put it into my bowl. I'm going to follow that with, I'm going to put a teaspoon now of the various herbs and spices that I want to be infused in this. I really like onion a great deal, so I'm going to put in a teaspoon of onion powder. I never could get enough onion, me personally. I don't really use garlic as much as other people do. I don't use it at all, actually. So I typically use onion powder, and it's one of my favorite things to use. I'm gonna throw some thyme in there and some basil, teaspoon each of everything. So we have some basil, just throwing in there. We have now, and again, I haven't mixed anything yet. I'm just putting everything in this bowl. I want to try to set this so you have to see properly. Let me see what I can do to assist in that process. I hope everybody's doing good, and I hope everybody's feeling good, and I hope this is a insightful and useful demonstration. So let me see if I can position this in a way that makes sense. I'll just continue to prop it up like that. That'll probably be the easiest thing. So I just put a teaspoon of basil, put a teaspoon of onion powder. I'm gonna also put in some oregano. I'm gonna do a teaspoon all around, teaspoon of oregano, because I think the herbs in this dish provide the background flavors and give it a nuance. So I'm gonna put that in there. And lastly, I'm gonna put some thyme. My ingredients list, I believe, calls for some parsley. I don't have dried parsley available, but I'm probably gonna chop just a sprig or two of some fresh parsley. And as I do this, I want to remind you guys, this particular dish, feel free to experiment. Don't necessarily look at this dish and the way in which I'm preparing it as the end all be all, like it has to be done verbatim. I'm very interested in empowering people through food. And part of that empowerment is giving people the free range to experiment and to embellish and to create things and make them their own. That's where the real empowerment happens in my view. So behind me, I have a little bit of fresh parsley, just to add another green herbaceous element. I'm gonna grab just the leaves. I'm gonna break off a few leaves of this. And I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually on day 2 of a juice fast. And I'm not gonna be eating any of this. So all this yummy food is probably gonna go to my housemates. But I've made this dish so many times, I know how it's gonna come out. So all I'm gonna do right now is take those sprigs of parsley and chop them up as fine as I can. Give me 1 second. Just chopping up these sprigs of parsley to a fine little mince, and I'll show you what I come up with. It's kind of hard for me to position the camera right on this, but I'll show you, and I'll do a better job at like positioning my camera afterwards when it comes to the collard greens. But I made a mince that looks like that. So the sprigs of parsley look like that, and that's about, this is roughly about a tablespoon that I've chopped up. And that's okay. Like with the amount of herbs and the proportion that we're using, this is still going to come out fine. Probably a little bit of a deviation from what I put on my notes, but again, if you were to follow those notes verbatim, it's going to work out fine. So I have all of those elements. I didn't add my salt. I'm going to take a teaspoon. I typically use pink Himalayan salt. I'm going to add a teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt into that. And then I'm going to add, it all depends on how thin or thick you want the batter. I tend to lean towards a little bit of a thicker batter. I'm going to add a half of a cup of water into this batter. If for some reason, because sometimes I forget, if for some reason as I look at this, I feel like this is not the adequate amount, I'll just add a little bit more water. So I take that, then I take my whisk and I whip it until things start to coagulate and sort of form a bond. So I'm looking at my batter. My batter's a little on the thicker side. I'm gonna add just another splash of water. So probably about another quarter cup of water, just to kind of make it a little thinner, because I don't want it too thick. Feel free to taste your batter to make sure that, you know, it's not too salty or too whatever. You see what my batter tastes like. The salt is prominent, but it's not going to really be overbearing towards the end. I'm just going to add another little splash of water, actually, to kind of neutralize some of that salt. So my batter looks like this right now, just to kind of give you some context. It's still a little on the thicker side, which is what I like to do. Oh, I forgot one more element. I'm going to put a dash of cayenne pepper into this, because I think that's what gives it that sort of like Southern charm. You know, like fried chicken from the South. Again, my family's not from the South, but as a child, I thought fried chicken was amazing, and I always would want it the way the Southern folks I knew would make it. So cayenne pepper is definitely something that works in there. Someone has an allergy to cayenne pepper, you may want to use black pepper or red chili flakes. If you don't want to heat it up at all, you don't have to add a hot element. I'm a big proponent of spicy food, so that's why I lean towards that. So let's grab our pan. Grab your favorite pan, I would implore. Actually, let me rinse my pan off, actually. It looks kind of funny. Give me 1 second. And then we take our pan and we're going to take our pan, and we want to do our best to find a pan that performs well as a non-stick pan. Like this pan that I'm using, it's pretty beat up, and it's a really high quality pan actually, but it does the job really well as it pertains to this dish. Like if you're not using a proper non-stick, or maybe even like a cast iron pan, you might notice some of the results of this, what we're making, might stick to the pan. So we want to just make sure that we use a pan that can do the job properly. So I'm going to turn on the heat on my pan to medium high. I'm going to also take these oyster mushrooms, and I'm going to pour my batter directly into them. Pour that batter directly in. And then I'm going to take a spatula, and I'm going to just sort of turn that around a little bit. Oh, if I could find a spatula. Yep. And I'm just going to make sure these mushrooms get a good coating of the batter. I want to make sure every inch of that batter is covered. And I didn't use the whole pound of oyster mushrooms in this instance. I should have mentioned that before. This is more like a half pound that I'm working with right now. It's about a half pound of oyster mushrooms. How's everybody doing? Is everybody okay? Is that, I want to just make sure everybody's with me. As an educator, I really take pride in making sure that no one's lost or overwhelmed, and that we're moving through this space together. So my pan has been on for the last moment, and it's been on high heat, medium high. I'm gonna try to give you guys a perspective of my pan in a moment, but I'll be right here. Everybody doing okay? Great. So now I'm gonna add roughly a tablespoon of grapeseed oil. You can use grapeseed, or you can use avocado oil. I typically use these oils because these are oils that are less harmful to the body when heated up. So I'm gonna use about a tablespoon. And as you make this dish, as with frying anything, sometimes you might notice as you're making a fried dish that there may be a need to add more oil. So my pan right now, I had it on the hottest temperature, but I'm gonna actually reduce the heat a little bit because I like to start it off hot, but then so I mentioned, I forgot, I think I might have mentioned this at medium high. I had it all the way on high. Now I'm gonna, because it's been sitting for a moment, now I'm gonna reduce the flame to medium high because I don't want to burn these, but I want them to cook properly. The heat of the pan makes a big difference. So we want to get our oil in our pan nice and hot, let it sit probably another 5-10 seconds. And then I'll show you guys what I'm working with as far as like what these mushrooms will look like in the, hope everybody's doing good. Everybody's still with me. I see people cooking. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I see.
Question.
Sure.
So I might have missed it, but you mentioned Himalayan salt. Can you just tell us like why that, you hear a lot about salt, sea salt, table salt.
Sure.
Why Himalayan
Sure.
salt versus other salt?
Pink Himalayan salt has an assortment of trace nutrients that are hard. Basically, when we talk about trace nutrients, we're talking about nutrients that are hard to obtain through regular foods. So it is an unrefined salt. So a lot of times, like regular white table salt is bleached, and it's robbed of its like nutritional properties, and it's also maybe some chemical adulterants in it, if that makes sense. So from my knowledge, pink Himalayan salt is one of the purest salts you can eat, and it also gives you a boost nutritionally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I think another piece I got to add to pink Himalayan salt, I really enjoy the way it salts the food. You don't have to. If for some reason you didn't get pink Himalayan salt, use the salt you have in your home. That's fine. But you may want to salt lighter. You may not want to salt the food as heavy as I salted it, because the pink Himalayan salt salts the food a particular way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna grab my coated mushrooms, and I'm just gonna put them in the pan. My pan is really hot, so I'm just gonna take the heat down just a little bit. This batter can burn really easily. Not that I think that's gonna happen to any of us right now. It's just something that's good to know. And I'll show you what my pan looks like in a moment. This is a very tricky thing for me to do in the middle of a juice fast. Like, actually, no, it's not. No, it's not. I shouldn't say that. It smells really good though. As soon as it hit the pan, I'm like, wow, that smells good. But I'm not gonna have none. I promise. I'm not gonna have none. So I'll show you guys what my pan is looking like in a moment. It's a good this is a good moment to get your tongs ready. If you have kitchen tongs available, tongs ready. And so far, this is what my pan looks like. I'm gonna put the close up on the pan. Can y'all see that? Hold up. And I'm just gonna let that sort of like cook for a few moments. Be careful of burning. You don't want to burn anything. If you're following along with me at home, if you reach the step where you put these in the pan, you should already start to experience the aromatics. You should smell this dish already. Your neighbors might even ask you, "What's cooking? That smells good," and they thinking you cooking chicken. You know. So I'm flipping. I'm doing my first flip of these babies right now, and there's a nice, beautiful golden brown that I'll show you guys in a second. Beautiful golden brown. That's being established right now. And we want to just make sure that all of the spots on the mushrooms are being cooked evenly. So sometimes you might have to play with the mushrooms so that it sits in the pan the right way, so that it's frying the right way. And our heat shouldn't be super high. Our heat should be on medium high. We want to make sure that, again, all areas of this dish, or rather of the mushroom, are coated and are being cooked. This is so pretty. Let me show you guys one more time. And you guys see? Smells good too. Ooh, it smells really, really, really good. And give me one moment. I have to sneeze. Oh man. Excuse me, guys. I'm dealing with seasonal allergies. not my favorite thing, but I'm a New York native. And maybe sometimes during this time of the year, thank you. During this time of the year, there are things in the air, pollens in the air that I'm just not used to that make me have sneezing fits. So I'm just, all you're doing is sort of like, this dish is basically on cruise control from here. You just want to monitor and make sure you're not burning anything. And you want to just make sure that there's no empty spots that are not being cooked. Because keep in mind, the shape of the mushroom might create a situation where an area that has batter is not being stimulated by the heat in the pan. Does that make sense? So we're just gonna let that cook for a moment. These are going right to my housemates because I can't eat. I'm in the midst of my juice fast, like I mentioned. Thinking about some other stuff I have in the fridge right now, but let me stop with that. Give you an update. This is what they're looking like. Let's see if you can see. Hold on. Hopefully you guys can see that on the camera. And this dish has become like a favorite amongst my clients, become a favorite amongst like when I do gatherings. I used to be reluctant to share this recipe because I used to feel like, oh my God, this is like my secret. You know what I mean? Someone said they think they need more oil for your cast iron pan. Add a light amount of oil. Don't add too much. Add a light amount. And that's something that's very normal for this dish, for having the need to add more oil. I'm just gonna let these sit for a few more moments, and I'm just gonna keep flipping them until they're perfectly the that I'm looking for, and then I'll show you guys what I got. We're almost there, actually. They're looking beautiful, smelling really good too. Remember, aromatics is a very important element of how we present food. When we present food that smells good, you've won half the battle as far as like being able to make your food appetizing and appealing. Like half the battle has been won when you can make food that has good aroma. So I think we're about done with this particular batch. Oh, they smell so good. Should you like, you can put some hot sauce on it. You could put various other types of sauce, like a sweet and sour or something like that. But here we go. Oh, let me try to position the camera in a better way. The light is kind of dim over there. But this is our finished product. This is what it looks like. You see? I'm not going to eat any or taste any because, again, I'm on a juice fast, day number 2. I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this juice fast for. Thank you for the compliments, guys, online. I don't know how long I'm doing this juice fast for, and I do juice fast for the purpose of my overall sense of health and wellness. And it's one of those little things I do that it's hard at first, but when I get through it, it's like a little love letter. It's like a little love note to my body, when I do juice fast. So let me just get some things in order right here, and then we'll move to the component of this dish. We just stash some things really quickly and just move some things out of the way, because we're about to work with our beloved collard greens, which are so tied into tradition as it pertains to Black folks in the United States. And I believe the tradition with collard green even goes back to Africa. You guys can do some fact checking and about that, but I do feel there's a tradition when it comes to collard greens that goes back to Africa. I believe that's also with black-eyed peas, if I'm not mistaken. So let me just get my stuff in order. I'm gonna reuse the same pan that I was using, only because it's probably one of my favorite pans and just very versatile. I didn't make too much of a mess in my pan, but I wanna actually just scrape off any remaining batter from the pan. Let me just clean that off. My pan is really hot still, so and I hope everybody's following through, and there's nothing overwhelming. If you have questions, I'll take a look at them in a second. Just get my pan ready for the next portion. Taking like a second, and I'll be there. All right. Does anybody have any questions so far? Are there any questions? I'm here to support. I'm here to make this an easy process. And So if there's no questions, I'm going to move forward. Either I'm doing a good job of disseminating this information, or people are really shy, or one or the other, or whatever. But I'm assuming that this is working out for folks. So I'm going to go back to my cutting board. Let me just wipe down my cutting board a little bit. This is one of my favorite ingredients. I use it all the time. I always find a way to sneak it into my food. I'm talking about shallots. What I'm about to make with the collard greens is extremely simple. This is not a labor-intense dish. It's just something simple that you can make for your family in a matter of minutes. And I'm going to position my camera on my cutting board so you guys can see what it is I'm doing. Give me 1 second. And something I have to note with regards to the ingredients, I had mentioned fennel powder. Unfortunately, when I went to the store the other day, they were fresh out of fennel powder, the specialty store I normally go to, and I have regular fennel seed, which is totally fine. If for some reason you didn't get the fennel flower, excuse me, excuse me, if for some reason you weren't able to secure some fennel powder, we have fennel seed. Thank you for the sneezing and the sneezing blessing. So someone said they missed the mushroom recipe. All I could tell you is that the recipe that I posted, it will see you through. It will see you through. And perhaps I could run down what I did again at the end. I can just sort of tell you what I did, or maybe even demonstrate it again, because I think we might have enough time to demonstrate another batch. So hopefully everybody can see my cutting board properly. This is my shallot, which I'm just going to cut the ends off of it. And then I'm going to compost what remains. I tend to cut the two ends off. Then I take, this one's probably easier to open, and I just peel the outermost skin off of it because I don't want anything with a weird texture in there. So that's that. And then I'm going to take these 2 cloves of shallot and I'm going to take them like this. I'm going to cut it once, cut it twice, then put it back on its side. Same thing I'm going to do with the other one. I'm going to cut it. This one I'm going to cut once because it's not as thick as that first one. If you look at the height, the thickness of these two, this one's thicker. You guys probably noticed that. Then I'm going to take my knife and then I'm going to cut it one more time this way. And then another time that way, another time that way, another time that way, until I get these thin strips of shallot. So you should have something that looks like that. And I'm going to just do the same for this right here. If you guys pay attention to my fingers, I don't often cut the way that trained chefs cut. Trained chefs cut like this. You tuck your fingers and you leave your knuckles on the top edge of the knife. I don't typically do that. I'm more accustomed to cutting the way I cut. I just point that out because somebody might be looking at me and they're like, wait a minute, like, that's not the way you're supposed to cut. I cut how I cut. So I have my beautiful collard green that was rinsed and washed earlier, before I started this. And what I'm gonna do, it's up to you whether you want to use the stalks, but I'm going to use the stalks because I think it's going to make it, give it a little bit of a counterpoint and make it kind of hearty. Just going to cut the very bottom end of the stalk off and just cut that into little pieces of collard green stalk. Push that to the side. Now, I'm going to take the remaining collard green. Actually, you know what? You know what I'm going to do? I'm inspired to do this. I'm going to take the stalks off the spines completely. So we just have leaf matter in our hands, right? Follow me, guys. We're just, and I'm not using an entire bunch. This is probably about half a bunch I have right here. But for the sake of the demonstration, I'm just going to de-spine by folding. Take the collard green leaf, fold it, and then you can just break it with your hands. It's not necessarily going to come out perfect, but you'll see why we did this in a moment. I'll explain. This is the last of my collard green leaves. This is a nice big one. Collard greens are so good. And this is actually not something that I spend all day making. I know there's some traditional Southern collard green recipes that require like lengthy prep. This is not lengthy at all. This is fast. So I'm taking this large leaf and I'm going to stack my other leaves in there. And then hold up, I'm going to do what they call I believe this technique is called a chiffonade. I'm going to just roll all of this stuff And I'll do it once more so you guys see what I'm talking about. So this is my rolled collard green leaf. Still have my stalks on the side. Actually, I'll use this opportunity to take these stalks and do what I did to the other ones. I'm just gonna do a chop. This is gonna just add another dimension to the texture of this dish. For me, good food is all about good flavor and good texture. I don't think you have a really well-meaning or well-put-together meal if you don't have those two things. Actually, there's a third element, good presentation, and then even a fourth element, good aromatics. You want the food to sell itself. You want the food to be desirable and to, just have that appeal. Just by sight, just by smell, you want to be able to activate that desire for people to eat it. So again, I'm taking my collard green leaves, just sort of like the largest one I have here, I just sort of like folded it. Then I'm just gonna stack them. Then I'm just gonna take them and roll them like so. Then I'm gonna take my knife and then I'm gonna cut that into thin strips. Your thin strips should look like, let me just show you what I'm talking about. The thin strips should look like that, right? We're gonna just keep cutting until we have it all done. So the next thing we could do, we could heat our pan at medium high. Let's get our pan heated at medium high and let us drop, I'm gonna position my camera right here. Hopefully it provides the ideal perspective. Yeah, I think that'll work. I'm gonna heat my pan to medium high, right? I see a question. You need 30 seconds? No problem. I need to sneeze, so I'll take. Woo. Please excuse me. I'm gonna wash my hands because I don't want to freak you guys out after sneezing and touching food. I know I'm not eating this food, and you're not eating it, but I think it's just proper practice. Wash your hands, especially if you touch your face or you sneeze. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants those elements in their food. I hope everybody's still doing good. My pan is nice and warm. I'm gonna drizzle some grapeseed oil into my pan. Again, I use the grapeseed and the avocado oil because they're good high heat oils. I may even decide to add some scallions to this dish because I like scallions a great deal. Let me see what I got. These scallions. Again, I like to offer variations. You don't have to follow my recipes verbatim. Just use my recipes as a guidepost to empower you to create some of your own favorite things. So I got some scallion I'm going to throw in there at some point too. Probably at the end. I love scallions. Love it, love it, love it. So just rinsing them off. So the first thing I'm gonna do after I get my pan nice and hot, might be a little too hot, should only be at medium high. I'm gonna add my my shallots. I'm gonna throw the shallots in the pan. And the shallots, be careful, can burn really easily. So we wanna make sure we stir them. We wanna make sure we stir them as we go along. A little bit of collard green got caught up in the pan. Smells so good. Just by doing something like this, you act, again, the aromatics. Like, I would think that anyone walking into my home or a neighbor would be like, yo, what's for dinner? Because it smells very, very appetizing. We just get these to sweat just a little bit. Next thing we do, we add all of our collard green, the stalks and the leaves. Stalks and the leaves all go in there at once. And this is not even something that needs to cook for a long period of time. I'm just gonna stir it. You'll know when you overcook greens when the color of the greens does not look vibrant. oftentimes when you cook greens, the color of green intensifies. And after that intensifying, that's when it gets wilted. So you want to avoid that. And so far, this is what my greens look like. Again, we're not cooking these to oblivion. We also don't want to be wasteful. That's why we use the stalks. I'm going to sprinkle in some pink Himalayan salt, but only about anywhere between a quarter to a half teaspoon. I'm going to just use a quarter. And if you guys feel like you need more, you could put more, but that's just a quarter pink Himalayan salt. I'm going to put a dash of cayenne pepper, just a dash. And again, if you don't want to use that, you can use black pepper or chili flakes. I'm going to saute that. And then I'm also going to add my fennel seeds. I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of fennel seeds. If you have the fennel powder, that's even better. The fennel is going to be largely responsible for flavoring this dish. So it's going to be like a fennel style expression at the end. Because this is, I'm going to reduce my heat to a very slow simmer just to keep this warm, but it's pretty much cooked. It's pretty much done, but I'm just going to keep it on very, very, very low heat. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to turn it off. My pan is already pretty hot. I'm just going to turn that off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop some scallions and just throw that in my pan. I love scallions. I love onions. I don't use garlic as much as I used to. I don't use it at all, actually. And that is because over the years, I've learned that garlic, there's different healing and teaching modalities. Some of the modalities I've come across pretty much explain that garlic can do a lot to enhance our emotional bodies, our emotional state. Also learned that garlic is something that can be toxic. So, I just do my best to avoid it as much as possible. So I just throw those scallions in there. We got our salt. We got again, the main vehicle for flavor in this dish is going to be the fennel, which I'm using whole fennel seed, but fennel powder has a different expression in my opinion. Fennel powder just sort of like, if you guys have it, if that's what you're using, feel free to use it, of course. But if not, if you're using the seed, try the powder one day. Also, another key point, you don't have to use fennel for this dish. You can use anything. You can use anything. You can use basil, you can use oregano, you can use thyme. There's a multitude of things you can use to satisfy this dish.
Hey, Chef, a couple questions.
Sure, go for it.
Can you eat collard greens raw? No, you.
Absolutely. I eat collard greens raw all the time. Not my favorite green to eat raw because it is like labor, like it feels like labor eating collard greens raw. But I also have a raw vegan foods background, which collard greens, people make raw wraps with them. And sometimes people even marinate the leaves so that they can wilt up just a little bit while retaining their nutrients. I'm gonna actually throw my oyster nuggets back in the pan for a quick second just to heat up, because I'm actually going to serve these to my housemates, and it looks like they brought a guest over. So any other questions right now?
Yeah, Deanna asked, what do the raw stalks taste like?
The raw stalks just taste like when they cook a little bit, they get a little softer, and they're just sort of like tender green stalks. No different from like maybe what broccoli kind of tastes like or something like that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I had another question just about the ingredients. Like, I appreciate your insight about the garlic, and I noticed that you picked shallots. And I'm always curious about if you could just tell us a little bit about like the difference between shallots, onions, scallions.
Sure. Shallots,
one over another.
Shallots and scallions and onions are all in the same family. Like I think, but botanically they're all like, I don't know what the proper botanical name is, but they're all like onions. And the reason why I use them, excuse me one second. the reason why I use them is because I started to adhere to the teachings of Dr. Sebi a few years ago, and Dr. Sebi, if you look this stuff up, I'm not necessarily this is not because this is not necessarily everyone's path, but he was someone that was able that had a history of healing people through food. And one of the things that he was doing, he was getting people away from hybridized foods and foods that are toxic. So he identified garlic as a food that can be toxic and can create harm in the body, especially if you're in a space where you're trying to heal. He also basically had a style of teaching that said that all disease comes from an acidified body and the byproducts of what an acidified body does. There's a whole lot of dimensions to explain with that, but I'm gonna leave it at that, you know. But are there any more questions about the ingredients I'm using? I think I saw a question in the chat. I don't see it anymore. Let me see what I have in there.
Is grapeseed oil a preference?
Yeah, grapeseed oil is a high heat oil. It is also, so in comparison, you'll watch a cooking demonstration and they'll tell you to use olive oil, right? Cool, great. But olive oil becomes something that's actually harmful to the body when high heat is applied. So you actually change the chemistry. You actually change the chemistry of the, I see ginger shot for allergies. I'm in the midst of a juice fast and I've had a bunch of ginger today in my juices. I didn't do a straight up shot, but I'll probably do that. So yeah, what was I saying? I was speaking of, I had a point I was making, I forget.
Oh,
if you guys
oils, you're talking about grapeseed oil and
oh yeah, grapeseed and avocado and sesame oils are the 3 high heat oils that are not hybridized that can withstand high heat and not compromise the food that you're making. Olive oil is a wonderful oil, but I typically use olive oil at the end of dishes. This is my plate, guys, by the way. This is what this meal looks like.
Wow.
What you got there? I see some folks.
Ooh,
That looks good. Okay. I see some stuff. Hey, I like it. Yes. I love it. I see y'all diligently cooking in the kitchen. You know, this is a dish that I present in a manner that is easy. I chose this dish because, how does it taste? Portia, how does it taste? You like that? Hey, look at that bowl. Look at that bowl. Amelia's got it. You know, nice. I want to see how folks' stuff is tasting. Yeah. You know, because I'm gonna be honest with you. I really try to do my culinary work minus the ego. And when I say that, it's not to say that I'm Puritan, like I'm a Puritan, I do it from a puritanical standpoint, but I've reached a point in my life, like I play sports also, I play basketball quite regularly. I'm at a point in my life, but also how do I know if my mushrooms, what's the question? How do I know if my mushrooms, there was a question that was just asked.
How do we know if the mushrooms are fully cooked?
Are fully cooked by the coating of the batter. Like if you have your heat on medium high and your batter, because it takes a moment for chickpea flour to get to golden brown, especially if you have a wet batter. The journey of the batter turning into a golden brown will be indicative of your mushroom being cooked. And furthermore, that's a mushroom that you can eat raw too. You know what I mean? So just to kind of give you that insight. Yeah, so I was saying, I'm not, at this point in my life, I'm 41 years old. I'm not interested in competing with other chefs. I'm not interested in competing, even when I go play basketball, if that makes sense. I'm more interested in competing with myself and, you know, demonstrating a higher level of commitment, demonstrating a higher level of performance. So when I make a dish like this and I present it to people, again, I really want to empower people so that they can make their own variations of things, so that they create new, it's incumbent upon us to create new traditions in this ever-changing world. What you got there, Michelle? Let me see what you got there, Michelle. That's the greens, Where's your mushrooms? I can't hear you, but it's all good. It's all good. Even my 8-year-old likes it, which is okay. I don't see the fullness of that statement. Okay. Even my 8-year-old likes it, which is a big deal. I can now add this to a few other green things he eats. Yeah, we want to make this food enjoyable. We don't want to make eating greens and eating mushrooms and eating vegetables into excess labor. We want to make this experience into an enjoyable experience. Food is meant to be fun. Food is meant to be enjoyable. This is part of, the dance. You love the substitution of the mushrooms and the chicken. Yeah, I don't use white flour. Obviously, you notice I could have used white flour for a dish like this. But what's the problem with white flour? White flour is acidic to the body. Again, that's a deeper discussion, but that's based on my teachings that I got from Dr. Sabi. Yes, it's a refined carbohydrate. We oftentimes think healthy food, you have to sacrifice taste and the pleasure that comes from eating healthy food, but that's not true at all. Michelle's eating her greens. How's your greens? Thumbs up? Nice. Let me see who else on the check-in. Giselle, how's it going over there? Just give me a thumbs up. I can't hear you.
I'm getting cooking tips from my parents, but it's going well.
Okay. Susie, how's it going over there?
It's so good. It's so good. And now I'm going to try the oyster mushroom one too. I'm Korean and like Koreans love oyster mushrooms.
Oyster mushrooms. Yeah.
I'm so excited to try that one and to share it with my family.
Lovely. Which, by the way, Susie, your kitchen is beautiful. Your kitchen is beautiful. Yeah.
So thanks. And the collard greens are so good. It was my first time making them and I never knew the leaves were so big.
Yeah, the leaves can be really big. Let me check in with April and see what she's got going on. How's it going with you, April?
This is fantastic. I have this big, beautiful bowl full of mushrooms and greens. And you can see I've been eating the mushrooms ever since I got my first batch out of the pan. And the greens are amazing. I love the fennel.
Nice.
It just really pops.
Simple ingredients can turn into magnificent things. Mother Nature has all the, how can I put it? The best chef is Mother Nature. We just have to be the best gatherers. I'm not a hunter, I don't eat meat, but we have to be the best gatherers and the best chemists and the best arrangers of these things.
I gathered, this is actually kale from my garden because it had to be eaten. It's growing, but I had kale.
Love it. But see, I love what you just did right there, April. I'm glad that you shared that because oftentimes when people who are not, and I'm not making an assumption about you, but if we're working with people that are, the kitchen is not really their domain, it's a little bit of an uncomfortable space. Something as simple as not having the smallest ingredient can impede on their ability to follow through with the dish. You can make this with kale. You can make this with chard. You can make this with, you could totally experiment. You could take some
I've been doing
green. You could take some shredded zucchini and follow exactly what we just did, or even some diced zucchini. And then you don't have to use fennel. Or you can make a combination. You could use marjoram. You could use, you could use dill. It's endless. It really is. Let me check in with some other folks really quickly. Thank you, April. Let me see who else we got there. I don't have a visual for Viviana. I see Natalie's there. I don't have another visual for the other Natalie. So let me just check in. Who else? I checked in with Amelia, checked in with Michelle. Yeah, I think the whole squad is checked in. But again, my message is empowerment through food. Plan to make the greens this weekend. Lovely. I want to ask everyone, if anyone's on Instagram, let me see, there's another comment. If anybody's on Instagram, please follow my page. It's literally Chef Corby. I'm the only Chef Corby with a K that I know of on Instagram, Chef Korby. What else would I implore you guys to do? I haven't announced it yet, but that's where I will. Thank you, Natalie, for putting that in there. That's where I will be announcing the actual launch of my crowdfunding campaign. My crowdfunding campaign initially, I was supposed to launch this a while ago, but COVID came about and all these other things. I almost pulled the plug on the whole thing because I just felt like, who's going to want to give me money in a time where people are going through such hardship? But I decided I'm going to relaunch it. And I've also decided that the funds that I'm looking to raise are not solely to cover the cost of my cookbook, but there are other things. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about me, earlier Natalie expressed in my bio of the various things, but I'm also a visual artist, also a musician, I'm also a painter, I'm also a writer, I'm also an educator. And my whole journey in all of those vocations is really what my book is about. It's a cookbook, but it's also my personal narrative, because as I stand right now at 41 years of age, I recognize that all the things I've experienced were in perfect harmony with who I needed to be in life. You know, so my book is going to be written with the intention of just allowing people, again, the title of the book is No Mistakes Allowed. I'm actually using that title because I'm a product of hip hop culture. And that title is a quote from the MC Rakim, who's considered one of the greatest MCs of all time. And I'm not making a statement that you cannot make a mistake. I'm actually playing with words. It's a play on words. I want people to make mistakes because the mistakes eventually lead to the masterpiece. You know, I used to, in the art world, I knew a woman who was representing a sculptor from Haiti. And this sculptor was making these really elaborate, I forget what the word is, silis, or these symbols associated to Haitian Vodun. This artist was taking steel drums and carving these things out and putting these really ornate details, these really intricate details. And this woman was managing, this was another Haitian woman I know that was managing this Haitian artist. And she would always say, the details make the masterpiece. The details make the masterpiece. But in addition to that, make a masterpiece out of the mistake. You know what I mean? What trips us up when we make the mistake is our fears, our doubts, our insecurities. In the kitchen, I've made mistakes into masterpieces, you know, and you just kind of have to, I don't know where I get that from. Perhaps it has to do with my Haitian roots, my African roots. You know, Haitians are great masters of sort of working with what they got. You know, I've met a Haitian painter that would burn various things to create paints. You know, like this particular painter didn't have money to buy paint, but he had access to maybe like some castor oil and some leaves and some other stuff, and he figured out a way to make colors and paint out of what he had available. You know, so never doubt yourself. You know, I know this is really, you know, motivational, like, but that's who I am. I can't separate that from my presentation. And by the way, speaking of hip hop, I don't know if you guys can see my T-shirt. This T-shirt is made by someone on my Instagram page that has it's called Unity Sounds. And this T-shirt, speaking again of hip hop, it says vegan by nature, but vegan by nature, this whole, you know, it's inverted because I'm on the camera. But that statement, this whole graphic is a play on the logo from the hip hop group Naughty by Nature. So, you know, just want to throw that out there. I'm going to walk out of the kitchen and into the patio because I think that's appropriate right now. But I'm going to open it up for any further questions or anything you guys want to talk to me about. I'm still with you guys for a while. I just feel like I needed some outside.
Yes, the sun. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for all the folks who are cooking along. I'm so grateful it was so good to see you cooking and have everyone taste it and to hear all of those things. I wanted to invite, before we get to Q&A, please do continue to write questions in the chat. If you have any questions, add them there. But I want to invite Viviana Woolridge up to just share a little bit about her work that she's working on with seeds and cookbooks and recipes in the African diaspora. So I'm going to just add her to the pin and ask her to share some of that. And then we can continue to have a brief Q&A right after that.
Wonderful.
All right. Hello, everyone. So as I was introduced earlier, my name is Viviana Woolridge, and I am the undergraduate research assistant for IBII, and I work with Hugh Aker and Dr. Graham. And we're working on something super exciting. So we've been working on a cookbook this semester. It's really helped me to open up my eyes into seeing food differently and food practices and just just the importance of food in general and how it really affects and impacts the culture. It's helped me see it through a different light. So hopefully once our project is finished and we continue to develop more things, it can help other people see it in a different light as well. So for this presentation, I will just be going over the research that we've done, or some of the research that we've done so far, and a little bit about our cookbook that we've been working on. So for this cookbook, we're going to call it Seed, Recipes Celebrating Traditions and New Beginnings. So we're hoping that in the future, as we continue to work on this project, that it'll be part of a 4-part series. So the one that we're working on right now is part 1, which would be Seed, hoping that part 2 would be Grow, part 3, Root, and part 4, Comfort. So in order to start us off, to get us started with this cookbook, what's in a seed? So a seed is both a literal and figurative marker of hope and sustenance of new beginnings. Nothing is more apt than beginning this series of cookbooks with seeds, rice, beans, and nuts. The foods that have sustained folks from the African diaspora across the globe are all seeds. And, you know, we just think of seeds, it's something small, not much, but when you think of all the possibilities that can come from seeds, it's really amazing. So the purpose behind our cookbook is to take us from seed to kitchen and beyond, exploring the complex histories of trauma and triumph in our families, the undeniable ways that food has always brought us together in the US, from pre-colonial era till now. Farming, agriculture, and food have always been linked to identity and freedom. So kind of one of our main goals through this cookbook is to look at and analyze different food practices from slave times. And then kind of relating that to now and how a lot of those food traditions and practices are still present and alive today in the Black community, and kind of where the history comes from behind certain dishes, certain ingredients that are still used, the importance, like why are certain ingredients so significant, or why are certain dishes so significant to the Black community even still. So we're hoping to dive into that during our cookbook and give more history to people so that they understand that there's always more to the picture. So through this cookbook, as it was mentioned earlier, my mom is Mexican and my dad is Black. So for me, I feel like I'm part of 2 cultures that have very diverse food practices. And I'm very thankful for it because I love food. So it gives me a great plethora to choose from. So through this cookbook, I'll be paying homage as well. And we're intending to showcase the global influence that the African diaspora has had in America. So North America, South America, Central America, and even like the Caribbean islands and Cuba and the Dominican. So I added in this map just to give a little bit of an idea of how widespread the transatlantic slave trade was. I think that a lot of people just think of it starting in Jamestown and Virginia, but slaves were brought everywhere in the Americas. So this just kind of gives an idea of a rough estimate, because you never know. We're told what we're told, but there's always more to the story. So that's what we're told about how many people were brought over from West Africa and different parts of Africa. So a couple more points off of that idea of paying homage. So the transatlantic slave trade actually started with Native Americans. One of my goals in life is to become a professor, and I would personally like to teach the similarities between Native Americans and their triumphs and tribulations that they went through with the Spaniards, and with African slaves, and what they went through with the Europeans, because for me, that's kind of both of my history. So I've always looked into it, and I've always found more similarities than differences. And I think a lot of people forget about where the transatlantic slave trade started. And I think that just knowing that there are so many similarities between that, I think that it helps to bring people together rather than set them apart. And while we had the Native Americans and Black slaves living together, as they were both here in America, they worked together to escape their oppressors. You have something, they were called moranos, which were the Black slaves and Native Americans, and they mixed together, and they had these communities called maroon communities where they essentially live together. A lot of times it was in like swamplands, especially in Florida, you have a lot of that. There's still maroon communities today in Jamaica, but they were able to live off of the land. And just like Chef Corby was bringing up, being able to find different ways to use food, and being chemists and all these different things. And we had to be adaptable. So bringing in some of those ideas into the cookbook as well. I know one of the dishes, I have Native Americans in my family, so bringing in fry bread, on my Mexican side, bringing in gorditas. So all of these different dishes that remind us of our oppressors, but also shows how we were able to persevere through things. So also food traditions were brought to all parts of the Americas and the islands. So for food traditions, it's not just cooking or the different types of ingredients, but just being able to cultivate certain things. So rice, so that came a lot from Africa, and they shared that with, or the way that they cultivated rice, they were able to share that with the Native Americans and vice versa. You know, we're able to share practices back and forth, and that's gotten us to where we are today. So a couple of our main ingredients that we're going to be using in this cookbook were okra, molasses, and sweet potatoes. So while working on this cookbook, we really wanted to choose dishes and ingredients that had a stronger history behind them. And I've learned a lot so far, and it's really been really interesting. So okra has been brought over from Africa. So some slaves, while being brought over to America, actually brought okra with them. And okra does very well in more like hot climates. So in the South, it's done exceptionally well, and you can see okra in a lot of the different dishes that the slaves ate. Many of their dishes, or most of their dishes, did have to do with like nuts or vegetables, beans and rice, not too much meat. So a lot of the meat that they were given was either provided by their slave masters, and a lot of times it was pork. And pork is absolutely terrible for your body. And if there was any other meat that they would have, a lot of times they had to go and hunt their own meat. So if you look at older cookbooks, a lot of them, they have like sections on different fowls and like how you're supposed to eat these different birds, rabbits and possums and all these different things, because they had to hunt their own meat if that's what they wanted. Molasses as well is going to be another one of our staple ingredients. So with molasses, it was actually it's used to create rum. And oftentimes molasses was used as currency and would be used to trade slaves. And for me, I guess just the relationship and the dynamic between how slaves would use molasses to create these very savory and sweet, like spice cakes or just different desserts. And it's something that you can enjoy, but at the same time, it's something that could be used against your detriment and separate you from your family. So just the dynamics between those two things is really interesting. And then we also have sweet potatoes, which, you know, sweet potatoes is definitely huge in Southern food and in the Black community. And I learned that it actually originates from Central and South America, which was really interesting to me, because when you think of it, you know, you think of, or at least for me, I think of Black people, I think of Southern dishes, different things like that, and to think that it came from America. So just to think like that, maybe it wouldn't have been such a big thing if we weren't over here. So, you know, a little food for thought, no pun intended, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Let me, it's like frozen. Oh yeah. So a couple of the main dishes, going based off of those ingredients that we wanted to highlight and touch on, gumbo. So for me, I don't eat pork and I also don't eat seafood. Even my meat intake is a little bit on the lower end. So the gumbo that will be highlighted in our cookbook, I use like chicken and different alternatives for people who don't eat pork. And it can always, like the meat can be swapped out, different things like that. But gumbo is definitely a huge staple in the South, especially in like New Orleans or different areas that have that more like Caribbean influence. And that's the other thing too that's really interesting about a lot of these dishes is how different the dishes can be depending on what region these dishes were made. So it's just very interesting to see how different cultures can influence so many things. Spice cake, spices definitely correlates back to Africa, and that's where we also use molasses. And molasses also has different health benefits depending on, I think it's like the color. So the darker it is, the more health benefits it has. So molasses is what we'll be using for spice cake, and then our sweet potato biscuits will feature our sweet potatoes. So why these dishes? So what do slave traditions, food practices, and the present all have in common? So traditionally, slave meals needed to be low maintenance and easy to cook or tend to. So when you think of barbecuing, if you think of having to be out in the fields all day long or working from sun up to sundown, you don't have a lot of time to really tend to those meals if you're having to be out in the field, but you still need to eat at the end of the day. So think of like one pot and slow cook your meals. These were definitely ideal for slaves to be able to still create dishes that were nutritional for them, obviously necessary to live, but could still be easy to tend to. These dishes also symbolize home and new beginnings at the same time. So I think that with these dishes, although some of them may have had like parts of Africa, right? These traces of Africa that remind them of home, such as okra. But then it also symbolizes new beginnings as they've had to be more adaptable and find different ways to create new dishes that were going to benefit them the best in the situation that they're in. So just those two kind of dichotomies living together. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Viviana. I'm gonna invite Chef Corby to come back, and I'm gonna also invite Terrell Foray to turn on his video if you would like to participate in this. You there, Terrell? Want to see my mic on? Oh.
Microphone check, mic check, mic check.
Hey. So we have about 7 minutes. So I wanted to have maybe a question or two, and then we can move to the next.
I don't think I hear any questions.
Sorry, I think I'm having some issues. Okay, there we go. There we go. There we go. We in there. Yes. Hello. How's everyone doing? Thank you again, Chef Corby. Thank you, Viviana, for y'all's demonstration and the presentation. It was absolutely wonderful. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is, what is one thing that you have to have in your kitchen, right? You think about all the things that are in there. What is one thing that you just absolutely have? It is a non-negotiable.
That's a woo, man. For me, I think I need to have a good knife. Like the knife is everything for me, you know. But I also would like to say I've also made some good dishes with a really dull knife because I've had to improvise. But to me, yeah, having a good knife is really important. I think we might have skipped the question. Is that what's going on?
Yes, I think I see a question in there. I'm not sure if it was answered or not, but the question was, how do you feel being vegan has improved your life? Then we'll go back to the question.
I've been vegan for 20 years. I started when I was 21. I'm 41 now. I did it as a response to a nonstop series of personal health issues I was having. When I write my book, I'll expand on all of that a lot more. But I'm someone that suffered with weight loss, acne, respiratory issues, digestive issues. I said weight loss, meaning I had weight issues, all kinds of health matters. Like by the time I was like a teenager, things were looking kind of shaky for me. And I took matters into my own hands as a young adult. And I said, you know what, I got to try something different. And here I am. You know what I mean? There are a lot of things that sort of also that I came in contact with that supported that. But it was a little bit off the beaten path and on the fringe of society to make that decision 20 years ago. But here I am, and it's gotten more popular. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And open up to other folks. The original question that we asked is, what is non-negotiable for you? Something that you absolutely have to have in your kitchen.
I think for me, it would be beans. I feel like beans are so versatile, and I learned eating beans like probably almost every day of my life growing up, because I grew up with my grandma. She said, as long as you have beans at the house, there's always something to eat.
There's always something. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's dope. That's dope. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Yana, my beans are rice. So for me, I always have to have rice. And if I have rice in my rice cooker, then I could do anything. I'll fry up an egg and eat it with rice, and that could be a meal when it needs to be. So that's my staple.
I would say sweet potatoes or yams, whichever one I can find, and also probably coconut oil.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Something you gotta have in your kitchen. Was that everybody? Okay. Next question we have is so oh, I thought it was something. It was just a car. Sorry. As you reflect upon your childhood, right? What is one thing that you remember about food, right, from your childhood that you can remember? Something that just sticks out to you as you reflect upon your childhood about food.
And that's open to anyone, or
that's open to anybody.
Okay. I have something I want to share. If somebody else, unless somebody wants to go first.
I'll share after you.
Okay. So growing up in Haitian culture, one of the first things I can remember that as a child that I ate that I was like, wow, this is really good. Haitian people make, you know, we're familiar with Jamaican beef patties, right? Haitian people make their own little meat turnover, you know what I mean? We just call them pate or Haitian patties. And they're either filled with codfish, chicken, or beef. And they're basically really simple, extremely flaky. So if you touch one, a bunch of crumbs are gonna just come out of your hand. But and they're spiced with Scotch bonnet pepper, so they're spicy. And it's the most buttery. I don't eat these things anymore, but it's the most buttery piece of perfection you ever had in your life. That's my testimony. Okay.
I think for me, it was like, what was it again, Terrell? Like reflecting on our childhood.
Just like, what do you remember about food growing up?
For me, it means family and community. From being really young, my grandma would take care of me, and both my grandparents are immigrants from Mexico, and so they don't speak English. And my grandma said, she's like, well, if you want to eat, you're going to have to learn how to speak Spanish, because I'm not going to feed you if you can't speak to me. So I learned language, and from that, all of these different memories, and just being able to be with my grandparents a lot and being able to share those moments with them was really big. But food always surrounded anything. Like Sundays, we'd always go over, she'd make breakfast. She had 8 kids, so she always makes really big meals, even though there's only her and my grandpa. So family parties, graduations, literally anything, or just for no reason at all. There was always food, and you're always inviting people over. So for me, it's just family and being able to be together with a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll just share the most memory that sticks out to me is forgetting to leave the chicken out for my mom. Oh my gosh, there are horror stories that I have about forgetting to leave the chicken out, and then realizing she's about to be home in 5 minutes, and I have no idea what I'm gonna do. yeah, I can't share what happened next, but thank you all for chiming in on that. Yeah, absolutely, the worst feeling ever, you know, like doom was coming, doom was coming for sure. But thank you all for sharing. And yeah, once again, thank you, Chef Corby, and thank you, Vivian, for sharing your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.